first want to talk about the bill that you rolled out today with a catalog of issues that you could regulate in social media. Why start with this one?
Well, last fall I laid out a white paper that had 20 different ideas. Some good, some maybe not so good. And I'm going to have a series of legislative proposals. This is one of the first ones. This one's a little more technical than some of the later proposals, which will be around privacy or around identity validation, transparency, other areas that need exploration. But this one takes a look at the abuse, particularly for large platform companies, people with more than 100 million users, where you see manipulative tactics on their site or their application. I think we've all seen sites that have flashing arrows to say, press I agree, press I submit, but you could never find the unsubscribe button on the same site. This would set up an industry advisory group, similar to the model in the securities industry of FINRA. So that would set up rules and regulations that would be able to enforce this effort against what we call dark patterns, against manipulative behavior, particularly gearing as well towards children. Okay. And we think it's a good first step.
So if it's a first step, what are the odds that this becomes law, or does this have to get rolled into a bigger package that's maybe years down the road?
I think there's such interest from the public, from industry, and you're increasingly hearing, Mark Zuckerberg put an editorial in the paper a week ago calling for more regulation. I think the platform companies are now going to have an opportunity to put their money where their mouth is to see whether they support this legislation and other approaches. My thought is there may be a privacy vehicle that may move, because the platform companies have said they want national privacy regulations. And my hope is that if the privacy vehicle comes out of the Commerce Committee, this legislation and other legislative ideas that I'll be submitting may be able to be rolled into this.
You mentioned the Mark Zuckerberg op-ed in the Washington Post. There has been some concern that the companies themselves would be calling the shots or informing how lawmakers are actually regulating these companies. If these are best practices, why aren't these companies already doing this?
Well, because I think what we've seen in the days of an unregulated internet, in the days of a wild, wild west, the ability for these companies to self-police, they just don't have the right economic incentives aligned.
Even in the last year with the threat of regulation?
And we see they have gotten better in certain areas, but still, when there was hearings today, for example, for Google and Facebook about the volume of hate speech that appears on the internet, where we see both domestically and international forces trying to come and split apart democracy. So I think we are going to need rules of the road in this more technical area where we've tried to defer manipulative practices. We've started saying, let's see if we can create an industry-driven standards body. Again, the analogy for folks in the security field is FINRA, that could set these standards and then enforce these standards, but we'd have the Federal Trade Commission being the backstop if this self-regulation or this industry regulation wouldn't work.
Senator Warner, I'm glad you mentioned industry standard like FINRA, but I was actually thinking more like the FDA and the warning labels on cigarettes. I mean, could you see legislation going so far as to federally standardize the opt-in box so that users will know exactly what they're opting in for in terms of sharing their information with a platform? Or could there be, for instance, warning labels on platforms, on social media platforms, that warn that the product that a child is about to use could potentially be addictive?
I think all of these things are very much in the realm of the possible. And what we wanted to try to start with was to see if the industry standard setting body, because you need this body to be agile. You need it to be able to move with technology. We think this would be the first cut approach. And I think, again, we've seen, being a former business guy for longer than I've been a politician, FINRA does a fairly good job around some of the securities issues. We like to try that model first, but I do think you'll end up with some level of standardization, because what we have right now is, candidly, a whole series of tools that have been intellectually and scientifically proven to be extraordinarily manipulative. So trying to make sure people are a little more informed about what they're signing up for, trying to make sure people don't allow beyond first-party consent to some of these platforms, trying to make sure that if you're YouTube, you've got some standards in terms of the kind of videos that are being exposed to children, all are in this bucket.